Devin Vassell has taken the next step. After being a pretty good role player throughout his young NBA career thus far, this season Vassell has taken his game to a new level. And at this point, Devin is a very good starting level player with a ton of potential going forward as well. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm Juicy Sports, I make opinionated NBA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. I also want to quickly mention that I recently started up an MMA channel, and if you guys are interested in that, the link will be in the description. But anyways, let's get into it. Devin Vassell was drafted with the 11th overall selection during the 2020 NBA draft by the San Antonio Spurs. And when Devin was originally getting drafted, he was seen as a pretty good 3-and-D type guy. Teams didn't necessarily see Devin as a guy who had a ton of upside. They basically thought that the player that he was in college would translate pretty well into the NBA, which would be a very valuable player in the league. Because I mentioned this in a lot of my videos, but teams around the NBA, literally every single team needs two separate things. The first thing they need is 3-point shooting, and the second thing they need is defense. So if you could find a player that's very good at both of those things, of course that guy's going to be very valuable for every team in the league. And another reason why those type of players are very valuable to every team in the NBA is because they fit in with literally any team. It doesn't matter who's on your roster. If you have a 3-and-D type guy, they'll fit in with anybody. If you have a guy that's very ball dominant, perfect, then they could just stand in the corner and wait for those 3-point opportunities. Or if you have a team that's very free flowing and moves the ball a lot, that player would also fit in pretty well, as he would be able to hit those catch and shoot 3-point jump shots on more opportunities. And originally when Devin was drafted, he was playing a little bit below his expectations, averaging around 5 points per game on 40% shooting from the field, 2.8 rebounds on 0.9 assists. And of course those numbers aren't really all that good, but you have to consider that the expectations weren't necessarily all that high for him in his rookie year, and of course he also was in his rookie season. Now when you also look at his 3-point shooting percentage in his rookie year, he only shot around 35% from deep, which of course isn't atrocious, but when that's the main ability that you're drafted for and you're not shooting all that well, of course it's going to be somewhat of a concern. But overall, he was doing some nice things in his rookie year. He was playing pretty good defense overall, I would say, and he was also showing some nice flashes, so people were definitely excited to see what he can do going forward. And in his second season, he improved his numbers across the board, averaging 12 points per game on 42% shooting from the field, 4.3 rebounds on 1.9 assists as well. And he was also playing really good defense overall. And basically in his second season, the numbers that he was putting up alongside with how he was actually playing out there is what people expected from him when he got drafted. And that kind of production is something that fans and the San Antonio Spurs organization thought Vassell would be for the rest of his career. Just a very valuable 3-and-D type guy that has some other abilities to create for himself as well at times, but nothing really much more than that. But things really started to change for Devin this season. Of course, he got a much bigger opportunity, as when you look at his minutes per game, in his rookie year he averaged 17 minutes per game, his second season jumped up to 27, and this year jumped up to around 33. So of course he's getting a much bigger opportunity, but he also put a ton of hard work into his game during each and every offseason, and this season he's having the best season of his career by far. On the year, he's averaging 20 points per game on 46% shooting from the field, 4.2 rebounds on 3.6 assists, and he's also shooting over 42% from deep, which is just incredible. Now the great thing about Vassell is his game still is certainly centered around that catch and shoot 3-point jump shot, but Devin has done a really nice job to add certain things into his game. He does a really nice job at playing off ball by constantly moving, either looking for that catch and shoot 3-point jump shot or even cutting back door to the basket for easy dunks or layups. But the biggest change for Devin is when he has the ball in his hands. Now Devin actually has a really nice ability to create for himself, whether that means creating for himself from that 3-point range, that mid-range, or even driving to the basket. Devin has done a nice job to really add a bunch of different aspects into his game. And at this point, I would honestly say that he's a very good offensive player from top to bottom, which is kind of crazy to say considering the expectations that he had going into the NBA. Now, it's not only his individual scoring abilities, Devin also improved his passing and playmaking ability as well. Due to the increased opportunity with the Spurs this season, he's also seeing the ball in his hands a lot more, of course, and he's also become much more of a passer and playmaker. Now, of course, this isn't necessarily something you can expect from him, and of course, it isn't necessarily something that he's amazing at, but he has shown a nice ability, I would say, to look for his teammates for open shots. And overall, I would say his basketball IQ is definitely very, very good. Because players that play his position or play his type of game, you don't necessarily expect them to be a good passer and playmaker, but if they're just decent at it and have a pretty good basketball IQ, you can't really ask for anything more. And that within itself is a huge bonus. Because the more passers and playmakers that you have on your roster, and the more players that you have with very good basketball IQs, at least higher than average, the better your team is probably going to be. Or at the bare minimum, the more valuable those type of guys will be. Now, one thing that I will say is it's still very early on into the season, and Devin only played 17 games thus far this season, so of course things could change. But at least early on, things look very, very good, and I don't really see a reason for why he would slow down that much. Maybe he would slow down slightly, and by the end of the year, he would average around 16 to 18 points per game. I could see that happening, but I don't necessarily see him slowing down to averaging around 12 to 14 points per game, and really just aggressing in every aspect. I don't really think that's all that likely, to be honest. I think he's put in a ton of hard work into his game during the offseason, and I think we're seeing the fruits of his labor. But now the question is, what are my long-term expectations for Devin Vassell? So in my opinion, Devin is much better than I ever expected him to be, and of course he's far above any pace that I had for him. So at this point, I would expect him to continuously improve his game season after season until he eventually becomes a very valuable starting player. Now at this point, I wouldn't necessarily expect him to become an all-star type guy, but when you look at the trajectory that he's on, he's certainly going in that direction. And if he were to become an all-star type player, I wouldn't necessarily be shocked based upon how well he's playing this season, but it's not something that I would expect going forward long-term for him, considering the type of player that he is, that 3-and-D type guy. Of course, he has improved tremendously, and he's a lot more than that now, but that's basically the basis of his game. But going forward, Vassell is of course going to be an extremely valuable player as that 3-and-D type player that also has a ton of other ability as well, and I do see him being a very legitimate starting player on basically any team, to be honest, and a player that's going to be very valuable to anybody in the league. But I guess we'll see what happens as his career does progress. But quickly shifting to the San Antonio Spurs, they're also a team that I am very excited about long term as well. Because of course at this point the Spurs are in a rebuild, and originally when they traded away DeJounte Murray, I didn't like the deal, but looking back at it at this point, I at least could see where they're coming from. They want to bring in as many draft picks and young players as possible. Of course, even though DeJounte Murray is a young player, at least they're getting a ton of draft picks in return and just multiplying their returns overall. Now of course getting those draft picks is step number one. Step number two is actually to draft effectively, but I do have a ton of faith in the San Antonio Spurs, because if the past 20 seasons taught us anything about San Antonio, is they have a very good management at the top. So I certainly am extremely confident in their drafting abilities going forward long term. But I guess we'll see what happens with not only Devin Vassell, but also the San Antonio Spurs as time progresses. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think Devin Vassell could turn into a really good player, maybe even an all-star type guy, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy it, check one of these two videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out guys.